Alright, guys, I'm late. I know, I'm late. Moana 2 came out a few weeks ago by the time you're listening to this, but, I saw it recently. Well, I had to see Gladiator 2 first and Wicked first, but then got around to seeing Moana 2 recently, and just still wanted to take some time to talk about it here. It won't be that long. This is going to be the usual non-spoiler and spoiler format, but we're not going to go on for too long because presumably by the time you're seeing this review, you've probably already decided whether or not you want to see Moana 2. You either have or you haven't, so I'm just here to share my thoughts and put it on the channel if you guys want to listen to them. So we're going to do our usual non-spoiler and spoiler discussion below. I'll give a clear delineation when the spoilers begin, and so for now, here we go. Moana 2. So Moana is, well, it's a cultural phenomenon. It is clearly, one of Disney's biggest successes in the 21st century, just by virtue of the fact that, the first movie, it came out, I want to say, maybe closer to 10 years ago. I don't think that's true, but it came out a while ago, pre-pandemic for sure. And, it was big at the time, and obviously How Far I'll Go and You're Welcome became big hits for the first Moana in terms of music, but, I don't think the movie made close to $1 billion or anything like that. But then it was interesting because after the fact, actually post-pandemic, in the streaming world, Moana became just this massive worldwide phenomenon where people were watching it over and over and over again. And so it was clear that Moana 2, which amazingly was actually going to be a straight to Disney Plus movie, which is crazy in hindsight, because the second Moana either has hit $1 billion or probably will hit $1 billion by the time you're listening to this. It's crazy. But this, the second Moana was originally going to be part of Disney Plus, but they decided with Bob Iger coming back that no, we're going to put this into theaters. And so you had the original cast coming back pretty much, the main actress who plays Moana in the first movie, and then Dwayne Johnson obviously coming back to play Maui in this, as well as the live action Moana film. So it is, the cast and crew coming back together, except for one major subtraction, not in the cast actually, but in the production, with Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did the music for the first Moana, departing and not doing the musical numbers for this film. So that was interesting, and that was something to note going into it. Now, for me personally, I was not somebody who saw Moana in theaters. I saw it a little bit later on streaming, actually. I was one of those people who contributed to those massive streaming numbers, but, I saw it a little bit later. And I have to say, I'm a big fan, right? For those of you who have been watching the channel for a while, I'm just a huge Pixar kid. I love the animation that Disney does. Pixar has been my favorite, but I do really enjoy some of the Disney animation as well. And so, it's not because of Disney animation or anything like that, nothing against it at all. But the first Moana just didn't quite click with me like I think it did with everyone else. And that's totally fine. It's just, a matter of preference or whatever. And to be honest, I can't even quite place it. It's a very solid movie. The music obviously is fantastic. How Far I'll Go is something I still listen to occasionally with other movie soundtrack scores. It's great. It's fantastic. But it didn't quite click with me in the ways that, other people were like, this is one of my favorite Disney movies ever, and it's so amazing. And I was like, that's awesome. That's so great. For me personally, I just thought it was good. Really solid, really good movie, but, not much more than that for me. So heading into the second Moana and hearing that people liked it, but, didn't love it, I was wondering what my experience with this film was going to be. And I have to say that, what I've heard, right, in the reviews, is that people who loved the first Moana seem to generally like the second Moana. So it seems like whatever your experience was with the first film, it went down about a tier. And I think that rings true for me as well. I thought the first Moana was really solid, really good. I think the second Moana is good. I'm not gonna say, it's meh or it's fine or it's bad or anything like that. I think it's a good movie. It just lacked some of that quality, that intangible quality that some of these Disney movies, Pixar movies or whatever, they seem to have, that seem to unlock this part of you that, only Disney magic or whatever they want to call it, I don't know, emotion, or you can call it emotional manipulation if you want to be cynical. But anyways, that thing that Disney can do better than most other studios. And there are exceptions like the How to Train Your Dragon films, but there's that quality, right, that just digs deep into your emotion and is able to pull it out. And I thought that was somewhat missing in the second Moana film. A lot of the people talked about how the music wasn't as good in the second film, and I have to agree, although I don't think the music is bad, except for one song towards the end that I was like, oh, this is clearly, like, this is a blatant attempt to try to get back to the magic of the original Moana music, and it's just not working. But the other songs were fine. I think one of the problems with the music in this particular film, compared to the first one, is that a lot of the music is just sort of people saying their emotions and saying general mantras and themes. I think How Far I'll Go is so beautiful because it's sort of, building up that angst and that, frustration of I want to be something more, and talking about the island and the culture. And it's really great music as well. You're Welcome is so fun. It's so fun, even though the singing is obviously not the strong point, as Dwayne Johnson is not a singer, obviously. And in this film, I just think that a lot of the music is more, this is what's happening, this is how I feel, this is how you should feel, and we're gonna move on. And I'm like, okay, that's fine, and so obviously the main actress, and I'm gonna butcher her name, so I'm not gonna try to pronounce it here, but the main actress who plays Moana, again, does a fantastic job with the voice, and she sings incredibly well. So it's nothing about her voice or anything like that. She still sings amazingly. Dwayne Johnson, he's about as whatever mileage you got with the first one, and I thought he was really charming in the first one. I thought he was great in this one as well. I think also on that note, the character development for these, for Maui especially, I thought was shortchanged. I think that I got the impression from the trailers that Maui was not going to be as big of a part of this movie. And I will say that I don't think it's necessarily because of screen time. I think almost his character was put off to the side, even though he was physically on screen for, I would say, less than the first movie, but not nearly as less as I thought it was going to be. So I just think that some of the character development was a little bit stilted in this movie as well. The visuals are great as always. I think the story at its core is also, it's solid. It has a good story. But I think that one of the key components that makes this feel like it's a little bit more hollow than the first one is that I think it's doing way too much to emulate the first one. I think that one thing that really good sequels generally do that make them stand out above all the other sequel, cookie cutter sequels, is that they don't try intentionally and obviously to copy the first film and what made the first film good. There are some sequels that try, because, they try too hard to go, look, this is the thing from the first movie. You really liked that, didn't you? Well, here we go again. This is the same thing from the first movie. I got shades of that just as an example, right? I don't hate a movie like Avengers Age of Ultron, but I think that one of the reasons that it just didn't quite stick the same way that it did with the first Avengers is there are some similarities that you can't help but go, I think this is Joss Whedon trying to go, look, this is the same thing from the first Avengers. Like, all those circle shots where you have all the Avengers fighting again, or, the shot at the beginning where all the Avengers are jumping into the snow. Like, it just kind of feels like, oh, I see. We're just trying to get back to that again. And I think that is something Moana 2 actually suffers for a little bit. Actually, this film is way more self-referential than I thought it was going to be. There are a lot of, hey, look at that. Do you remember that? That was from the first movie, and we're doing it again, but a little bit differently. There was a lot of that in this movie. And that was a little distracting after the third or fourth time they did that. And I was like, oh, no, but I get it. Like, you're doing the same tropes, and that might be fine, but you don't have to keep pointing out the fact that you're just doing the same things as in the first movie. Again, I don't think the movie is bad, particularly. I don't think I don't dislike it. I don't think it's, I think it's good. But I just think that it didn't quite live up to what I had hoped it was going to be. Even as somebody who didn't particularly love the first movie, I like it a lot, but I just think that this sequel had some potential, had more potential, and didn't quite live up to it, but I think it's good. I think it's just good. And I'll leave it at that. So that is my non-spoiler section for this review, but we're going to jump into spoilers now. So for those of you who have seen the film, you can feel free to stick on. For those of you who haven't, just save this to watch later and come back to it if you'd like to hear my spoiler thoughts. I'm not going to talk for too much longer, but here we go. So, just picking up where I left off, just talking about all those times where it seemed like this film was trying to reference the first film. I don't remember every single example, but what I do remember is sitting in the theater going, how many more times are they going to say something like, in the last one, or remember the last time, or last time we did this? And I was like, no, I remember. I watched the first movie, and I think you should assume that every one of us watched the first movie too. But there was a lot of that going on, which, I don't know. For me, as somebody who... again, and this film is not too dissimilar in terms of general story structure to the first one. For example, the whole idea of there's something that happens that gets her off the island. This time it's not, her parents' disapproval or anything like that, but she, gets off the island, and then she finds Maui, and, they go on an adventure, and then there's some kind of big disappointment. They fight something in the ocean. Again, it sounds a little bit more general, and I suppose that, that might be being a little bit too uncharitable, but I think that when you have the same broad story strokes, and then on top of that you have characters going, and the last time, remember we did this, and remember we did that last time, it's like, oh, okay, so I'm here to just watch Moana 2, which is basically Moana 1, but a little bit different. I think that can work. It's fine. I just wish that they had gone maybe in a little bit of a different direction as well. In terms of my other really big not complaint, but, just big criticism of the film, I think that Maui's character felt super one-dimensional in this movie, because I think in the first film, you had a lot of time devoted to him, about how his character has an ego and how his ego has to evolve to learn to work with Moana and all these different things. And in this film, I just feel like he showed up at the beginning to kind of set up the villain, quote unquote, or, I don't know. The villain in this movie is whatever. Even in the first film, Tafiti was not super there in terms of presence until they got to the very end. And in this film, it's sort of similar until the post-credit scene, I guess, where they're setting up Moana 3, I'm sure, and all this kind of stuff. But, I just think that Maui was kind of there to just be there. And I, give a pep talk at the end. And that was the song I was referring to, the big, you're welcome emulating song where they tried to replicate You're Welcome, and I didn't like it that much. If you did, that's great. I thought I don't know the names of the song. I'm recording this right after I saw the movie, so forgive me if I don't have the names in the songs, but the one about Beyond, I think that's the big one, the kind of How Far I'll Go song, that was pretty good. It was okay. And the one that the Bat Lady sings, I think that was also pretty interesting and pretty fun, but like I said, I think a lot of these songs are more, this is how you should feel, this is how I feel, this is what's going on, let's go. And I think that was really what was missing from this movie in general. So again, I don't think this is a terrible movie. And I think that, if you like the first one, I think you'll like the second one. I just don't think you'll like it as much. But, I'm sure there are people who like this one more than the first one. And I think it was a fun hour and 40 minutes. And then I'll probably not revisit it for a long, long time. So those are my thoughts on Moana 2. And yeah, let me know if you've seen it in the comments down below. And let me know what you think about Moana 2.